Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Ad Astra Kansas Money Talks podcast. I'm Joe Blubaugh, joined by Mark Johnson and Bob Schwartz of Bob Schwartz Financial. Offices in Victoria, Kansas, as well in Silver Lake, Kansas, where we are recording our podcast at today. And you can find out more about them on their website at bobschwartzfinancial.com. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, or you listen to us on your favorite podcast. We'd love you to subscribe there as well. Give us a rating, all those good things. And today we are going to talk about a book. And I know that, Mark, you talk about this being your favorite book on money. And Bob, I know it's really up there for you as well. We're going to talk about The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And I've said this before on the podcast, and I'll say it again because I truly believe it. In your guys' job, you guys manage money, but you're also kind of psychologist in some ways sometimes, and there truly is a psychology when it comes to money. Maybe tell us a little bit of background of why this book was so important to you and why it's so important that it's worth talking about on the podcast today.
Yeah, it's important, or it's useful for pretty much anybody. That's the first thing. It can be for if you're starting out investing, you've been an investor forever, you're a financial advisor, whatever it is. You can look at this book in a lot of different ways, and it's going to help you. And I really love that about that book. But really, down to the core, like if I was just going to tell one person like why, it helps you understand your relationship with how you look at money. And I think that is really important for anybody to understand. Like there are things in your life that have impacted how you look at your money.
And Bob, you've been doing this for a long time. Not saying you're elderly or anything, just you've been doing it a long time. And I'm sure you've seen it. You've got very similar clients, who make about the same amount of money, and the way they look at money and the way they treat money and the way that their finances are completely different.
And yes, absolutely. You can have two houses making the same amount of money, and one can be a tremendous saver. The other ones are a train wreck, and yeah, it's amazing. And everybody's different. I've never seen a household that you're just like Joe, you're just like Mark. No, nobody's is the same.
And that's why it's so important when you talk about what you guys do, just as an overall general, 35,000 foot view, is every person is different. Every family, as you just said, is different. And therefore, you can't use cookie cutter solutions for every client that comes to you. Everybody is different. And that's why when we're on the podcast here, we'll talk about some generalities. But it's always important to remind people that your situation could be different than what we're talking about here. And you should definitely make sure you do your own due diligence. Mark, let's go back to the book for a minute. What is the core message of The Psychology of Money?
Money is emotion. Yeah, money is emotional. Housel talks about, doing well with money is not necessarily how smart you are, but it's how you behave with your money. And there's nothing truer than that. It is all about your behavior and how you're able to deal with fear, greed, envy, security, pride, which are the kind of things he talks about with relationships with money. And so how are you able to behave when things are bad, when things are good, when, how do you look at money, and how do you make decisions when times are bad and when times are good?
Let's talk about a bad time. It was a very short bad time, but right there in early 2020, spring of 2020, when COVID hit, I bet you had quite a few people calling you and saying, get us out.
No.
Okay.
Simply because we totally educate our clients towards we're not getting out. So, but that said, we did have a couple of phone calls, and I call it capitulation, capitulating the market. We want out of the market. If we do our job correctly, we will never have clients get out of the market. But it is, I hear other advisors that I know talk about how their phones ring off the wall, and people people need to understand that they need to stay engaged in the market during those periods. We get more phone calls during that period that I'd say come from the greed side as opposed to the fear side. A lot of clients will call up then and go, hey, I want to buy this or that. And you don't want to greed invest any more than you want to have fear of the market. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when it comes to chasing that investment, the hot stock, what it is, that's another psychology though, and that's why I say you guys are truly psychologists, because sometimes I'm sure you're talking people off the ledge, whether it's get in or maybe overinvest in something.
How many times do we hear, especially younger people, that everything is sped up in today's day? We watch 30-second videos. Everything is fast. And everything needs to be immediate. And so all of a sudden, like, oh, I want to be involved in that stock that went up 5 times. Oh, I'm not. Well, I got to find the next one.
Yep.
And so let's sprinkle my $1,000 I have into these 50 different companies and hope one hits. And then you lose them all. And instead of, hey, if I would have invested in, these 3 things that have shown, returns and show good profit, and I did my research, and I would have made money for month after month after month, whatever it is. Instead, you're chasing something instead.
So another thing, Bob, it makes sense when you think about the psychology. People get fearful, people get greedy, but I also think that when you talk about the psychology of money, and we just had this discussion right before we started the podcast, people really like to invest what they know as well. And in Kansas, and probably a lot of the folks that you work with, you see a lot of people that want to buy farm ground or ag producers. So there's a psychology that goes along with that, I'm sure.
Right. I own what's close to me, what I can see, what I can look at. Mm-hmm. How many times have we all heard, I don't want to own land 100 miles from here. I want to own land where I can drive by and look at it. And we like what we're comfortable with. And there's no... Mark or I have no problem in our practice with people wanting to own land. I mean, that's one of Mark's goals as he ages and time goes by. And I own some farm ground because I started buying it to help diversify my portfolio a little bit. And I mean, the key thing is that diversification. You don't want to have all your money in farm ground, because we sit down with people all the time that don't have any spendable income. They don't have enough discretionary income to do what they want to do because the farm's not creating wealth for them or that kind of income.
They don't want to sell that land.
And they will not sell that land.
Yeah.
It's we say this a lot when we're meeting with farmers for the first time. I know the answer to this, but I have to ask it. Is any of this ground ever going to be for sale? And the answer
is no.
Not as long as I'm alive.
We understand that. Yeah.
But and that's fine. But yeah, we like to go down to the brick and mortar bank. How many of us, people my age, if you say to them, there is an online bank paying 1% higher than your bank, and there's no strings attached to it, FDIC insured, and they'll go, I ain't doing that.
Yeah. Not worth it.
I'm going down to the bank, put my money in the bank, and that's okay. But we got to start thinking a little bigger picture. And Housel's very good at pointing that out.
And so I know there's a chapter in there that talks about when somebody has quote unquote enough.
Yeah.
Can you maybe talk us through that chapter in the book?
Yeah, and that chapter book is about like finding your financial peace. Like, what are you comfortable with? And where a lot of it is about how much comparison is a trap in life. Like, there should be a time period where you find like the money coming in, the lifestyle that I'm living feels good, and that I can do this forever and whatnot. If we're always comparing ourselves to the person down the street that is going on the vacations or buying the new cars, the keeping up with the Joneses, as we all have heard that, but that lifestyle creep, and so much in today's age, is such a problem for so many people because it's so easy to watch things online where you look at someone your age going on a trip or buying a car and you're like, I want to do that too. And sometimes you got to realize that person doing that might be putting that on a credit card, or they might have spent their whole savings, and that's not for you.
Or they're not participating in their 401k.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can't understand everyone's financial situation is different, and everybody looks at money in a different way. And so that comparison is just, the thief of joy. It really is.
I think
especially with money.
One of the most important things that I can say as an aged person that I wish I would have accelerated on was less of keeping up, having the new car, and more of financial peace, having things paid for, and having things put in the proper understanding psychologically of money, and having that peace that Mark just talked about. The earlier you can get that into your life, the less the stress is.
Yeah.
And I think back to that, and how today at 74, I hope my cars just continue to run well. I'm not sitting there looking out at, wow, I like that car, and nothing wrong with looking at that next, thinking about that. I'm not saying that at all, but when you reach that peace with your money, it becomes very easy to make good decisions. It helps that part.
Well, and that's kind of what I wanted to expand on, because enough, of course, that's a nebulous term. What is enough? And I think a lot of people have that fear of running out of money. Mm-hmm. For the people that I love, that I know where they're at with their money, I have the fear that they're not going to do enough with their money.
Right.
Like I can look from a distance and say, you have enough, but they don't feel like they have enough. And then they continue to work for a few more years when they could have went out and done travel. And my biggest concern, and something that I'm very mindful of with my own investments, is to make sure that, when I feel like I have enough, we're going out and enjoying that money. And I'm way less worried about running out of money because I want to go enjoy it. I'm sure you've run into clients that have just moving the goalposts, so to speak. They don't ever feel like they have enough.
One of the things that I believe is a big problem is exactly that, on the end of having plenty, but never feeling like they've got enough. And that is one of the things a person has to fight as they build wealth during their life is, hey, at some point, you're going to become a net spender. You're not always going to be able to save. And that is something that I've watched clients fight with. And, actually, in terms of the psychology of money, the happy people are the ones that have money and don't care. That is the perfect place to be. Not people that don't care and don't have money.
Yeah.
But we've got clients that they're wealthy, but their relationship with money is not good. Because they won't spend it, they become a little bit
chintzy.
Good word, better than the one I was coming up with. So thank you. They become a bit chintzy. Maybe they're not as philanthropic as they probably would have been maybe earlier. You sat down with somebody in their 70s today and say, did you ever, in your wildest imaginations when you were 20 years old, dream that you'd have this much money? The answer, what the answer is?
Yeah, no.
No. Because of inflation, mm-hmm. and because people became engaged with U.S. equities in the last 50 years. It'll be the same for you at being a little bit older than Mark, and when Mark is my age, it'll be the same for him. He'll go, I never dreamed we'd have this much. Now, it takes this much to get by, but mm-hmm. It's
I think.
Well, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the one thing I think about too is, you know, for people that are nearing that or in retirement that have plenty of money, one of the biggest things is when you're at home and you're not, let's say you're not going out and you're not spending a lot, all you hear on the radio and the TV is about fear, about how you're going to run out. Like, and I think that can kill, like, too, like, hey, oh no, I don't want to run out. I don't want to go spend. I don't want to go on this trip. I hear all these bad things all the time. Instead of just going out and doing some of those things you wanted to do, because that's not really unless you go search that's not really what you're seeing every day in the everyday messaging.
Right.
Well, and I have the firm belief that there are two major risks as you go into retirement: running out of money and not spending enough money.
Yeah.
And you hear every time you turn on the TV or listen to a podcast, you hear about running out of money. You very rarely hear somebody talking about that other risk, which is actually saving too much money and not enjoying it, and doing the things in life that are important to you and your family.
There's a very popular book right now in whatever, I don't know if it's for everybody, every generation, but at least in people my age, what's called Die With Nothing.
Die With Zero.
Yeah, Die With Zero. And I do think that is becoming more of people are starting to realize, like, okay, like this is what I work for. Whatever.
This conversation that we're having right now, if you want to go back and look at a past episode, kind of fits into that whole FIRE movement that we were talking about in some ways. But it also is a nice segue to a next point we want to kind of talk about, and that's risk and some luck. So, we've talked about, your generation, my generation coming up behind it. We have more money than the generation before that.
Right.
And some of that is, taking the risk with equities, but also hitting into some of the best times the markets have had ever over the last couple of decades. So risk and luck are a big part of this as well.
We've talked about it a million times. You can't time the market. We all know that. You can't time the market, but you can get lucky. I mean, the day you start investing could be the market low, that could just happen. And there's no way you would have known that, but that could have happened. And you started from the best possible time.
Yeah.
Your returns look amazing. And you're like, wow, investing is great.
Let me give a personal example. So my very first money that we put into the market, we had some retirement savings through our work, a little bit, not much. But the first time we actually put money into IRAs, and it was a really pretty large chunk for us, was April of 2008.
Good time.
Yeah, perfect timing. But then I'll tell you, when you talk about timing the market, before I kind of had done a lot of research into this, 2 different times I tried to time the market, and I don't even want to think about how much money I lost both times. I mean, it just... that's
the thing about luck. We just talked about you could.
I got lucky.
You could get in at the beginning, but you could also, the opposite end of that, you could put in your money at market all-time high and maybe it crashes and it never recovers, and that's just unlucky,
100 years ago, not really, but American Funds used to put out a brochure. It was called Louis the Loser. And Louis invested his IRA money on the worst day of the year, the highest market day of the year, every year for 20 years. But I don't know if it was 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And then there was, it was Louis the Loser and Larry the Winner, or Willie the Winner or something.
Yeah.
And Willie put his money in on the market low of each year. And Willie's money did fantastic because he bought on the low every year. But so did Larry's, who bought on the high every year.
Yep.
Now there was a difference, but I guarantee you Larry would feel pretty good. And you bring up something that people say to us all the time. Well, this isn't going to last. This isn't going to last. And I'm going to quickly tell the story about me driving down the road with my mentor. And I said, Gene, what happens if the next 30 years aren't as good as the last 30? Now, this was 1976. So it's 1946 to 1976. And I said, what happens? That was right after the war. People are coming home, building houses. Everything's going crazy. Everything's going good. We're never going to have times like that again. And Gene said to me, what if the next 30 years are half as good? as the 1946 to 76. And I go, oh, people will still do a lot better than they would have done anywhere else. He goes, yeah. And then he proceeded to talk about other things that I'm going to cover real quick. And that is, there were 300 million people in the United States then. I'm sorry, there were 210 million people in the United States then. There's 330 million people in the United States today. So that's more consumers. We did not do one penny's business with China in 1976. Yeah. We just started opening the door. Look at how much business we do globally. And when people say we're a global economy today, we are.
Absolutely.
We absolutely are. We have to include them when we want companies that think globally. But to have the thought that, I was lucky that, no, being engaged and putting your money away systematically over a long period of time is going to make you wealthy.
Agreed. Yeah. Dave Ramsey, like him or hate him, he always talks about he gives out big numbers for returns, but he does say something that's accurate. He always says, what if I'm only half right?
Yeah.
You're still going to be, in a great shape. And,
yep.
And that's kind of the way to look at it. Consistent, long-term, and take advantage of the power of compound interest, which is the next point we're going to talk about from the psychology of money. The rule of compounding. There's a quote, I always forget, is it Einstein that said it? There's no greater force in nature than the power of compound interest.
Yeah,
something similar to
Eighth
that.
wonder of the
Eighth wonder of the
Eighth
world.
wonder of the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you just and in the book, you never. The first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it, unnecessarily. We've talked about this on this podcast about not letting it's an avalanche, and you start from a little snowball, and if you stop it, it's got to get rolling again. And that is so true with that. Wealth is built slowly, not explosively. It is going to, whatever the $100,000, it takes half as long to get to 200 as it does to get to your first 100. That's really resonates with me, or that whole mindset of, okay, if I can get to this point, well, that same point is going to take me half as long the next time, and that only compounds over time with the more money you get. Just getting started is sometimes the hardest part.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So when we meet someone who's 20 and they've managed to save some money, it excites Mark and I, because we know they've got their train on a track and it's going, and as long as they stay engaged, they're going to be in great shape. And Mark's so right about that. I've watched so many clients that we've written. Every time a client went over $1 million, I used to write them a note. Hey, that's really neat. And every one of those clients, it seemed like it took no time for them to cross the next threshold. It happens faster. And Mark's exactly right. And if people will look at it that way, you can't look at the market as I'm going to jump in and I'm going to double my money overnight, because you're going to get bit. And it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's long term, and that makes it awfully hard to stay engaged sometimes.
And you kind of mentioned kind of staying consistent with it and keep that snowball rolling. So that means through the ups and the downs of the market, keep be consistent, slow and steady wins the race. The other thing I see or hear from time to time, and I've had some coworkers that have done this, that they will take loans against their 401ks, and their reasoning is, well, I'm paying myself the interest. And if you just look at it at face value, you're like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I'm paying myself 5%.
Sure, but if you start thinking about it, you're losing all that opportunity cost, and you've now taken that train off the track, so to speak.
You've interrupted
the snowball. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we don't need to really focus on it, because we've said it on this podcast a lot. Just long term, compound, stay the course.
Yep.
Stay the course. So our key lesson number 4 from the book everybody's financial decisions make sense to them. We've kind of talked about this a little bit based on their experiences. Definitely helps drive them and their investment choices.
And I think the thing when I read this book, that chapter, the whole like encouraging you to have empathy for others' money choices and not being super judgmental all the time, because I think that's super easy to do. Especially for what we do, it's easy to look at things, in a certain way, but you have to understand people were raised a certain way. They have a complicated, relationship with money, with however they were brought up. And so how they look at things could be completely different than how you look at things. And I think that's important to understand when you are talking with people about money, especially a relative or a family member, to go in with an open mind instead of being super judgmental with how they are doing their business.
And I would imagine is a huge skill that you guys have when you sit down with your clients. They might have a certain direction that they want to go, and of course it's maybe not what you normally do, and you've got to have some empathy for them while at the same time maybe showing them some ideas of some other ways they might want to look at it.
It's a constant, I call it more of a tune-up. So those are the great ones. When somebody comes in and they've already got a life of saving, but let's just say it's always been into fixed rate instruments, and they come in and they're talking about their 401k, and they've always been in fixed, and we visit with them about taking some of that and put a percentage of that to work in the market. That's a tune-up, and we're gonna the amount we're gonna put in the market is going to be a small portion of that, but it's going to be that they're comfortable with. But we've tuned it up. The distributor needed turned a little bit, and we had to set the timing chain a little different, but not hard. Where it gets hard in our business is when someone comes in and they've already got their mind made up that something's bad. The stock market's bad. My grandpa told me the stock market's bad, and that's what everybody my age heard. Was 1929 big stock market crash. Well, it was a banking crash, but the banks are better at advertising, and they turned it into a stock market crash. And the market did drop tremendously, but a lot of banks closed forever. And
a lot of those businesses are still open today.
Right.
Yep.
right. Procter and Gamble's still here.
Yeah.
And so when people we get. And that's where we have to have empathy for how they think. Yeah, we were all told that the stock market's bad, but let's talk about why people felt that way about it. And then, do you know how many people had money in the stock market in 1929?
Oh, I'm going to guess it's an extremely small percentage.
Yeah, less than 8% of Americans had money in the U.S. stock market.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to guess today that's north of 75%.
85% is what I've read. Now, I don't know if that's right or not, but the 401k laws
changes things a lot.
1987,
Yeah.
totally game, or 1983, totally game changed Americans' participation in equities, and the American public was ill prepared to handle that, i.e. people like Mark and I have jobs today because of that.
And that's a nice little bow on this, because we come back to this book, The Psychology of Money, and it really plays into that. You see that, the 29 stock market crash, the start of 401ks in the 80s, and really how people look at the market today as a wealth building instrument really can be defined by psychology in a lot of ways. So we've mentioned a couple of books today. Die with Zero. I have not read that book. But I've heard it's a great book. I think it's a great philosophy where you find what do you need to survive, and then you use that rest of that money and go enjoy. And the whole the thought of that book is that you're dying with almost no money. I've heard this term, your last check bounces. But and then of course the book that we really focused on today, The Psychology of Money, definitely, if you get an opportunity, if you've got one book, this is what Mark said before we started, if you have one book to read on money, this might be the one you want to think about.
That's certainly the way that I feel about it, and Mark feels about it, and we know other advisors that feel the same way, that it is the book to read if you're only going to read one.
Yep.
Right. Well, very good. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your knowledge and your stories today. Thank you for joining us once again. BobSchwartzFinancial.com if you want to hear more information or find out more information or the contact information for these gentlemen. And give us a thumbs up, a review, subscribe to the podcast. We would appreciate that. Until next time, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.